El español es raro.
Castellano.
El castellano es raro. Spanish is weird, and we can't even decide what to call it. Why do some people say cerveza and others cerveza? Where does Jota come from? How about the Catholic kings? Wasn't one of them a girl? We'll find the answers to these and more coming up. What's in a name? Some people call Spanish Español and others call it Castellano or Castilian. There's various reasons for that. I mean, there are lots of languages in Spain and they're all Spanish languages. So in European Spain, people prefer to say Castellano as one of the languages. In South America, when people threw off the colonial yoke, or at least the Spanish one, some people preferred to use Castellano instead of Español because it wasn't associated with the country that had colonized them. In other places, Español is more common. The Real Academia de la Lengua and the Asociación de Academias de la Lengua Española both agree that both forms are correct, but they prefer Español for international use because that's what it's called in many other languages: Spanish, Español, Spañolo, Shibanayu, Hispánski język, etc. What's with these upside-down question marks and exclamation marks? Many languages mark questions with some kind of question mark and shouty bits with exclamation marks. Spanish goes one step further by marking the beginning and the end. The RAE introduced them in 1754, but they took a while to catch on. You can even combine them for shouty questions. ¿Y tú quién te crees? Let's do a bit of grammar next. The Spanish word a means to, as in like, voy a Madrid, I'm going to Madrid. But you can also use it to indicate the object of a sentence, when that object is a person or an animal that you like. Veo la casa, I see the house, but veo a Claudia, because Claudia is a person or a pet. This personal a can also make some interesting contrasts. Quiero a un médico. ¿Así? ¡Qué romántico! ¿Cómo se llama? ¿Dónde se conocieron? No estoy diciendo que esté enamorado de un médico, sino que necesito un médico. Así que no es que quieres a un médico, sino que quieres un médico. Querer has two meanings in this context: to want and to love. Using the accusative a means that the object of the sentence is a specific person, so would tend to mean the love version of the verb. Whereas if you leave the a out, it means you just want any old doctor. In lots of dialects, you can say the object twice. So in English, you say, I saw your brother, or I saw him, but you can't say, I saw him, your brother. In Spanish, lo vi a tu hermano is perfectly normal in many cases. That's the kind of thing that you need to get a feeling for, what the Germans poetically call Sprachgefühl. And you get that by being immersed in the language to the extent that you just kind of feel what's right, what sounds right. And that's where the sponsor of this video comes in, Rosetta Stone. It doesn't just give you words or complicated grammar rules or convoluted sentences that don't give you the full picture. Instead, it gets you used to the language through context, words, images, sounds, repetition and patterns.
No les dejan jugar con estos juguetes dentro de casa.
Helping you start recognizing what feels right in a language. Rosetta Stone has wonderful speech recognition technology where you can practice pronunciation and get feedback.
El bulldozer está empujando tierra.
El bulldozer está empujando tierra. There are 25 languages available, including European and Latin American Spanish. And there are also more niche languages, like Irish and Latin. Did Julius Caesar have a hot air balloon? Y si quieres aprender inglés, te ofrece dos variantes, británico y estadounidense. There's a QR code on screen now, and a link in the description, that gives you 60% off a lifetime subscription to all 25 languages. So please check it out. And now back to the magnificent weirdness of Spanish. Spanish has some interesting and quite unexpected sounds for a European language, like the velar fricative j sound in Jota, hijo, reloj. Jorge Javier come jengibre en Gijona. And some varieties have the dental fricative th. En Zaragoza me tomé 5 cervezas. Where did these come from, since Latin had neither? Well, there was this king who had a lisp. Hang on a minute. There was a king, Pedro of Castile, Pedro the Cruel, or Pedro the Just. Suppose he was only cruel to people who deserved it. Anyway, he had a bit of a lisp. I told you so. He died in 1369, but people only started saying Cerveza in the 16th century. So what happened? People started saying, you know that king who died 200 years ago and had a bit of a lisp, and he was cruel but just at the same time. Wouldn't it be cool if we started speaking like him, but only in some words? So what really happened? Here's the story of the sibilants in Spanish. Sibilants are those kind of type hissy sounds. So in the 14th century, there were pairs of sibilant sounds, voiced and voiceless. So you had s, z, sh, z, and ts, z. Caza, hunt, decir, to say. Paso, step. Casa, house. Fijo, fixed. Fijo, sun. Little by little, some of those distinctions were lost. So by the 15th century, ts and z both merged into ts, and sh and zh both merged into sh. But the distinction between s and z was maintained. Caza, decir, paso, casa, fijo, fijo. This process continued, and by the 16th century, s and z had lost the distinction as well. By the 16th century, the t bit of ts had been lost. So what had been ts became th, which is the kind of very hissy s with the tongue just behind the teeth. Th. Meanwhile, s and z merged to a special kind of s where the tongue was further back. Las patatas. That kind of s that you get in modern Iberian Spanish and some dialects of Greek. So we start to see the problem if we change our example word a bit. So we get caza for hunt, casa for house, and caja for box. Can you hear the difference? People could, but what happens in languages when you get sounds that are so close together is that they start to move apart. So caza, as in hunt, started to become caza. Sh, as in casa, house, stayed where it was and remains today. The sh in caja, box, moved backwards first to caja, like the German sound ich, and then moved even further back to the vela that we have today, caja. Andalusian Spanish took a slightly different route, losing the distinction between casa, hunt, and casa, house. And this is the pronunciation that spread to the Canary Islands and most parts of South America. Now, if you've ever studied Spanish, you've probably been told that there are two verbs for to be, ser and estar, and that one of them's for permanent things and the other one is for temporary things. So, for example, soy inglés, I'm British. That's not something that changes every now and then in most cases. Estoy cansado, I'm tired. I'll hopefully get better. All that's fine and dandy, and then suddenly you come across está muerto. He's dead. Temporary? How come? Well, it's better to look at it that ser is about what things are, classification, definitions, the nature of things. Whereas estar is about a condition, often as a result of change. So like someone wasn't dead and now they are. They've changed as a result of dying. On a more cheerful note, and most things are more cheerful than death, let's talk about how you say you in Spanish. English used to have a distinction between thou and you. Thou was for singular people of an informal nature. You was for referring to several people, or you could also use it to be polite. In the end, English lost that distinction, so now you say you to your mum, your boss, the king, your dentist, and your dog. Spanish kept it, however, as did many other languages. We call this the TV distinction. So you use tú with friends, family members, animals. Often books say inanimate objects. I never talk to inanimate objects, but if you want to talk to an inanimate object in Spanish, you call it tú. unless you're from certain parts of the world. We'll come up to that later. Posh people, people that you're more distant from, people who are above you in some kind of hierarchy, or strangers, you can call usted, which originates from a medieval term, vuestra merced. Even that is an oversimplification, because in some places using usted can make you sound like you're just being respectful, but in others it makes you sound overly formal, stiff, and distant and cold. And now we come to the plural. As I said, English used to have that singular plural distinction. Lots of dialects of English kind of miss having a special you plural word, so we end up inventing new ones like y'all, yous, you guys, etc. Peninsular Spanish maintains that distinction between singular and plural you, but also has the informal formal distinction. So you have tú, usted, vosotros, ustedes. Vosotros is interesting because it has its own verb form, which can actually sound a bit odd if you're not used to it. So, vosotros cantáis, cantad. The first time I ever came across it was in Yorkshire. I'd learnt my Spanish in Latin America, but was teaching English on a summer school in York. A Spanish speaker came up to me and my friend at a student disco and said, ¿Qué pasa que no bailáis? And it was like, what are you, this is medieval. What are you talking about? So as you can gather from that story, in Latin America, people don't say vosotros. They've lost that distinction between formal and informal in the plural, and everybody is ustedes. But that's not the end of the story, because in some parts of Latin America, there's another informal you word, which is vos. And that can take its own verb forms. So, vos bailas, or it can use the two ones. Vos bailas, vos sos, or vos eres. Chile has its own verb forms. And yes, I call it Chile and not Chile for the same reason I call France France and not France. So anyway, going back to the verb forms, colloquially in Chilean Spanish, you can have vos tenís or tú tenís. In Argentina, vos sos, but in Chile, vos serís. Vos bailás, vos bailai. Vos comés, vos comí. Vos vives, vos viví. Traditionally, Spanish makes the difference between je and then ll, which is like the Italian in figlio. One spelt Y and the other one double L. Se cayó, she fell. Se cayó, she went quiet. But in lots of the Spanish-speaking world, that distinction has been lost. Se cayó, se cayó. I first learnt Spanish in the Ecuadorian Andes. Well, in Quito, I wasn't a llama herder on the Altiplano. That's one of the places under the influence of Quechua where that distinction is maintained. So I would say se cayó y se cayó. She fell over and went quiet. Anyway, moving on. Around the mouth of the River Plate, so in Buenos Aires and Montevideo, which I think we should call Video Mountain in English, really. So anyway, the people of good airs and the Video Mountaineers say je for these. So se cayó y se cayó. Or younger speakers have started to say sh. Se cayó y se cayó. Ayer llevé una botella de vino a la playa. Spanish is really big on the subjunctive. And one cool example is the difference between busco un gato que sabe bailar and busco un gato que sepa bailar. So in busco un gato que sabe bailar, there's a cat that I know can dance. And I'm looking for it. Maybe it's my cat. Maybe I taught it some cool choreography. Whereas busco un gato que sepa bailar is, I need a dancing cat. I don't necessarily know that one exists, and I definitely don't have a particular one in mind. Just any old dancing cat will probably do. We don't make that difference in English, really, and I'm looking for a dancing cat. I'm looking for a cat that can dance. If you've got a dancing cat, please let me know in the comments below. Spanish does this weird thing with the plurals of gendered words. So like your mum and dad, my aunt and uncle, my nan and granddad, the king and queen, that kind of stuff. So if you say mis padres or mis papas, my fathers or my dads, that would normally be taken to mean my parents, my mother and father, my mum and dad. Now, of course, it could also mean my dad if you've got two dads, which is perfectly possible. Hijo is son, but mis hijos can mean my kids. Abuelo is grandfather, but mis abuelos means my grandparents. ¿Tienes hermanos? Have you got any brothers and sisters? Los reyes de España, the king and queen of Spain. Now there are various attempts at more inclusive forms like todes, mis amigues, and different ways of writing inclusive or non-gender specific words, most of which are difficult to read out loud, but quite neat. Back to phonetics, which is always my favourite. Another group of sounds that Spanish has that lots of European languages don't are v, the, and r. And you get those when b, d, and g come between two vowels. So bodega, la bodega, abogado. Sometimes those sounds can disappear altogether, and that's especially common in the ending ado, which forms lots of past participles. So cansado becomes cansao. And that's very common in the Caribbean and in coastal areas. The wonderful phrase nadita de nada can come out as naite na. Absolutely nothing. In parts of Andalusia, the Canaries, and lowland areas of South America, S's can become H at the end of syllables. Mi hermanos están cansao, or can disappear completely. I once did a C2 level Spanish language exam for the British Foreign Office, and the listening component was an interview between a Spanish radio reporter and the President of the Dominican Republic. That was like a contrast between consonants on one side and vowels on the other. Señor Presidente, el carcajadas, patatas fritas, las pasosas. Estoy muy contento de estar aquí entre usted. Y no de patacón pisado. Spanish is really good at making words cuter or bigger or smaller or rougher or even hitting you with them just by adding endings. A casa is a house. A casita is a cute little house. A casón is a big house, whereas a casote is a big, ugly, huge house. Un momento is a moment, but un momentito is a small moment. In some parts of Spain, Costa Rica and Colombia, instead of ito for little cute things, it's ico, un momentico, un ratico. Aso or azo can mean wonderful, incredible, impressive, like un golazo is apparently what's called a scorcher, so it's an amazing goal in one of those sport things. It can also be a blow with something, either figuratively or not. So, dame un telefonazo, give me a phone call, give me a bell. Or it can actually mean hit me with the telephone. Here's some examples of people hitting each other with chairs and eggs. Life happens, right? Sometimes things just happen to you and they're not your fault. You didn't do anything. So like, you could drop a glass unintentionally. Spanish has a special form for that. So rompí un vaso means I broke a glass. But se me rompió un vaso means a glass kind of went and got broken on me. Olvidé tu nombre. I forgot your name. Se me olvidó tu nombre. English does have a version of that. Yeah, I'm sorry, your name seems to have slipped my mind. It kind of, I didn't forget it. It just ran away. Faded into nothing. It might come back. Who knows? Spanish has a lot of words that come from Arabic. From the time when the Iberian Peninsula was ruled by Arabic-speaking Muslims. Now, lots of those words start with al, which is the Arabic word for the. And it can change according to the first letter of the word that comes after it. So as, ash, an, at, etc. When Spanish borrowed some of these words, it forgot that the al bit meant the. And so that bit was incorporated into the borrowing. So something like alcalde, meaning the judge, ends up as el alcalde, the mayor. Well, from a historical point of view, obviously in everyday use, people don't think of it as meaning the mayor. Other examples include almohada from al-mijadda, azúcar from azúcar, aceite from azait, albahaca from al-habak, and alcázar from alcázar. Interestingly, that was borrowed from the Latin castrum into Arabic and then into Spanish. So it's almost like Old Latin lent it to the Arabs, who then gave it back to the Spanish. So you've got this wonderful layer of Arabic words in food, agriculture, administration, architecture, and everyday life. So Spanish isn't just Latin wearing a different hat. It's Latin influenced by the original languages of Iberia, by Arabic, by languages of the Americas, and by migration. And it all comes together to form this wonderful, rich, wonderfully weird language. Next, you can check out these other weird languages. See you soon. Hasta la próxima.